Picture this. Your boss asks you to try Copilot Studio. You think you're spinning up a polite chatbot. 10 minutes later, it's not just chatting, it's booking a cruise and trying to swipe the company card for pizza. That's the real difference between a Copilot that suggests and an agent that acts. In the next 15 minutes, you'll see how agents cross that line, where their memory actually lives, and the first 3 governance checks to keep your tenants safe. Follow M365. Show for MVP live streams that cut through the marketing slides. And if a chatbot can already order lunch, just wait until it starts managing people's schedules. From smart interns to full employees. Now here's where it gets interesting. The jump from smart intern to full employee. That's the core shift from copilots to autonomous agents. And it's not just semantics. A copilot is like the intern. We tell it what to do, it drafts content or makes a suggestion, and we hit approve. The control stays in our hands. An autonomous agent, though, acts like an employee with real initiative. It doesn't just suggest ideas, it runs workflows, takes actions with or without asking, and reports back after the fact. The kicker, admins can configure that behavior. You can decide whether an agent requires your sign-off before sending the email, booking the travel, or updating data, or whether it acts fully on its own. That single toggle is the line between supportive assistant and independent operator. Take Microsoft Copilot in Teams as a clean example. When you type a reply and it suggests a better phrasing, that's intern mode. You're still the one clicking send. But switch context to an autonomous setup with permissions, and suddenly it's not suggesting anymore. It's booking meetings, scheduling follow-ups, and emailing the customer directly without you hovering over its shoulder. Same app, same UI, but completely different behavior depending on whether you allowed action or only suggestion. That's where admins need to pay attention. The dividing factor that often pushes an intern over into employee territory is memory. With copilots, context usually lasts a few prompts. It's short-term and disappears once the session ends. With agents, memory is different. They retain conversation history, store IDs, and reference past actions to guide new ones. In fact, in Microsoft's own sample implementations, agents store session IDs and conversation history, so they can recall interactions across tasks. That means the bot that handled a service call yesterday will remember it today, log the follow-up, and then schedule another touchpoint tomorrow, without you re-entering the details. Suddenly, you're not reviewing drafts, you're managing a machine that remembers and hustles like a junior staffer. Cosmos DB is a backbone here because it's where that memory often sits. Without it, AI is a goldfish. It forgets after a minute. With it, agents behave like team members who never forget a customer complaint or reporting deadline. And that persistence isn't just powerful, it's potentially problematic. Once an agent has memory and permissions, and once admins widen its scope, you've basically hired a digital employee that doesn't get tired, doesn't ask for PTO, and doesn't necessarily wait for approval before moving forward. That's also where administrators need to ditch the idea that AI thinks in human ways. It doesn't reason or weigh context like we do. What it does is execute sequences, plan and tool actions based on data, memory, and the permissions available. If it has credit card access, it can run payment flows. If it has calendar rights, it can book meetings. It's not scheming, it's just following chains of logic and execution rooted in how it was built and what it was handed. So the problem isn't the AI being smart in a human sense, it's whether we set up the correct guardrails before giving it the keys. And yes, the horror stories are easy to project. Nobody means to tell the bot to order pizza. But if its scope is too broad and its plan execution connects resolve issue quickly to order food for the team, well, you've suddenly got 20 pepperonis on the company card. That's not the bot being clever, that's weak scoping meeting confident automation. And once you start thinking of these things as full employees, not cute interns, the audit challenges come into sharper focus. The reality is this: by turning on autonomous agents, you aren't testing just another productivity feature. You're delegating actual operating power to software that won't stop for breaks, won't wait for approvals unless you make it, and won't forget what it did yesterday. That can make tenants run more efficiently, but it also ramps up risk if permissions and governance are sloppy. Which leads to the natural question: if AI is now acting like a staff member, what's the actual toolbox building these new hires, and how do we make sure we don't lose control once they start running? The toolbox: Azure, AI, Foundry, and Copilot Studio. Microsoft sells it like magic. Launch autonomous agents in minutes. In practice, it feels less like wizardry and more like rewiring a car while it's barreling down the interstate. The slides show everything looking clean and tidy. Inside a tenant, you're wrangling models, juggling permissions, and bolting on connectors until it looks like IT crossed with an octopus convention. So let's strip out the marketing fog and put this into real admin terms. Azure AI Foundry is presented as the workshop floor, an integration layer where you attach language models, APIs, and the enterprise systems you already have. Customer records, SharePoint libraries, CRM data, or custom APIs can all be plugged in, stitched together, and hardened into something you can actually run in production. At its core, the promise is simple. Give AI a structured way to understand and act on your data instead of throwing it unstructured prompts and hoping for coherence. Without it, you've got a karaoke singer with no lyrics. With it, you've got at least a working band. Now, it's worth pausing on the naming chaos. Microsoft rebrands tools like It's a Sport, which is why plenty of us confuse Foundry with Fabric. They're not the same. Foundry is positioned as a place to build and integrate agents. Fabric is more of an analytics suite. If you're making licensing or architectural decisions, though, don't trust marketing blurbs. Check the vendor docs first, because the labels shift faster than your CFO's mood during budget season. Stacked on top of that, you've got Microsoft Copilot Studio. This one lives inside the Power Platform and plays well with Power Automate, Power Apps, and AI Builder. It's the low-code front end where both business users and admins can create, configure, and publish copilots without cracking open Visual Studio at 3 a.m. Think pre-built templates, data connectors, and workflows that plug right into the Microsoft stack. Teams, SharePoint, Dynamics 365. The practical edge here is speed. You can design a workflow bot, connect it to enterprise data, and push it into production with very little code. Put simply, Studio gives you the ability to draft and deploy copilots and agents quickly and hook them into the apps your people already use. Picture a travel booking bot in Teams. An employee types, book a flight to Chicago next week, and instead of kicking back a static draft, the copilot pushes that request into Dynamics travel records and logs the reservation. Users see a conversation. Under the hood, it's executing workflow steps that ops would normally enter by hand. That's when a bot stops looking like a gimmick and starts replacing actual admin labor. And here's where Cosmos DB quietly keeps things from falling apart. In Microsoft's own agent samples, Cosmos DB acts as the unified memory, storing not just conversation history, but embeddings and workflow context. With single-digit, millisecond latency and global scalability, it keeps agents fast and consistent across sessions. Without it, copilots forget like goldfish between prompts. With it, they can re-engage days later, recall IDs, revisit previous plans, and behave more like persistent teammates than temporary chat partners. It's the technical glue that makes memory stick. Don't get too comfortable, though. Studio lowers the coding barrier, sure, but it shifts all the pain into integration and governance. Instead of debugging JSON or Python, you'll be debugging why an agent with the wrong connector misfiled a record or overbooked a meeting series without checking permissions. The complexity doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. Admins need to scope connectors carefully, decide what data lives where, and put approval gates around any sensitive operations. Otherwise, the low-code convenience becomes a multiplication of errors nobody signed off on. The payoff makes the headache worth considering. Foundry gives you the backroom wiring, Studio hands you the interface, and Cosmos DB ensures memory lives long enough to be useful. Together, they collapse timelines. A proof-of-concept agent can be knocked together in days instead of months, then hardened into something production-grade once it shows value. Faster prototypes mean faster feedback, and that's a huge change from the traditional IT build cycle, where an idea lived in a PowerPoint deck for a year before anyone tried it live. The fine print is risk and responsibility. The moment an agent remembers and acts across multiple days, you've effectively embedded a digital colleague in your workflow, one that moves data, pops records, and never asks for confirmation if you don't set the guardrails. Respect the memory store, respect the connectors, and for your own sanity, respect the governance settings. Treat these tools like sharp knives, not because they're dangerous on their own, but because without control, they cut deep. And when you start looking past the toolbox, you'll see that Microsoft isn't stopping at build your own. They're already dropping pre-baked Copilot agents into SharePoint, Dynamics, and beyond, with demos that make it look like the entire help desk got automated overnight. But whether those polished stage bots can survive the mess of a real tenant, that's the next thing we need to untangle. Pre-built Copilot agents, ready or not. Microsoft is already stocking the shelves with pre-built Copilot agents ready for you to switch on inside your tenant. These include the facilitator agent in Teams that creates real-time meeting summaries, the interpreter agent that translates conversations across 9 languages, employee self-service bots to handle HR and IT questions, project management copilots that track plans and nudge deadlines, and a growing set of Dynamics 365 copilots for sales, supply chain, and customer service. On paper, they look like a buffet of automation. The real question is, which ones actually save you time and which ones just add more noise? Conference demos make them look flawless. You'll see a SharePoint agent surface documents instantly, or a dynamic sales agent tee up perfect lead responses. The reality on site is mixed. Some do exactly what they promise, others stumble in ugly ways. But to give Microsoft credit, the early adoption data isn't all smoke. One sales organization piloting a pre-built sales agent reported a 9.4% bump in revenue per seller. That's not trivial. Still, those numbers come from controlled pilots, not messy production tenants, so treat them as interesting test results rather than gospel. Let's break it down agent by agent. The facilitator is one of the easier wins. Instead of leaving admins or managers to stitch together 10 chat threads, it compiles meeting notes into a digestible summary. That's useful. especially when planner boards, files, and chat logs are scattered. The risk comes when it overreaches. Hallucinated action items that nobody agreed on can trigger politics or awkward who actually promised what moments. Track those false positives during your pilot. When you log examples, you can adjust prompt phrasing or connector scope before expanding. The interpreter feels like a showpiece, translating live conversations across Teams meetings or chats. When it works, it's slick. Global teams can speak naturally, and participants even get simulated voice translation. But this is where risk shoots up. Translation errors in casual chats are annoying. In compliance-heavy scenarios, contracts, policy clauses, regulatory language, rewriting a phrase incorrectly can move from glitch to liability. I've seen it nail conversations in German, Spanish, and Japanese, then fall apart on a disclaimer so badly it looked sarcastic. If the wrong tone slips into a customer chat, damage control will eat whatever time the agent saved. Again, log every fumble and check if error patterns match certain content types. Employee self-service agents are the safest bet right now. They live in Microsoft 365's business chat and answer rote HR questions, payroll dates, vacation balances, IT reset guides. These workflows are boring and predictable, which is exactly why they're strong first pilots. Start with HR or password resets because those systems are well-bounded. If it breaks, the fallout is minimal. If it works, you've offloaded dozens of low-value tickets your help desk doesn't want anyway. Project management copilots sit in the middle. They create task lists, schedule reminders, and assign jobs to teammates. In low-complexity projects like recurring marketing campaigns or sprint retros, they're a solid time saver. But without careful scoping, they'll push due dates or assign the wrong owner. Think of it as giving Jira 2 shots of espresso. It will move faster, but not necessarily in the right direction unless you're watching. Dynamics 365 agents are bold, but not always ready for prime time. A supplier management agent can track orders and flag delays. A sales qualification agent can highlight your highest value leads. And a customer intent agent jumps in during service tickets. This is where the biggest upside and biggest risk collide. Closing low-complexity service tickets works. Dropping it on escalation-level cases is like asking a temp worker to handle your board presentation. Great speed, poor judgment. So what's the takeaway? Not all pre-built agents are enterprise-ready yet. The rule of thumb is simple. Pilot the predictable ones first. HR, IT self-service, or routine project nudges. Document false positives and mistranslations during your trial so you can tweak connectors or scope before scaling. Save the customer-facing copilots for later unless you enjoy apologizing in 6 languages at once, which tees up the real issue. These agents are only safe and useful when you give them the right lanes to drive in. With the wrong guardrails, the same bot that saves tickets can also create a compliance headache. And that's why the next piece isn't about features, it's about governance. Because without hard limits, even the good copilots can go sideways fast. Responsible AI, the guardrails or bust. That's where responsible AI comes in, because once these systems start acting like employees, your job shifts from building cool bots to making sure they don't run wild. Responsible AI is less about shiny ethics posters on a wall and more about guardrails that keep you out of audit hell while still delivering the promised efficiency. Here's the blunt reality. If you can't explain what an agent did, when it did it, and what data it touched, the angry calls won't go to Microsoft. They'll go to you. Responsible AI is about confidence, auditability, and survivability. You want speed from the agent, but you also want full visibility, so every action is traceable. Otherwise, streamlined workflow just means faster mistakes with bigger blast radius. The trade-off is productivity on one side and risk on the other. Sure, agents can slice hours of scheduling, ticket triage, or data pulling, but the same agent can also expose payroll data in a chat or email, a confidential distribution group, without asking first. And once users lose trust, if it spits out private data even once, you'll spend the rest of the quarter begging them to ever try it again. Microsoft can market magic. You'll be stuck explaining rewinds. Now, how do we fix this? 3 guardrails are non-negotiable if you want autonomy without chaos. First, role-based access and scoped permissions tied to the agent's own identity. Don't let agents inherit global admin-like powers. Treat them like intentional service accounts. Define what the bot can touch and nothing more. Second, data classification and enforcement, typically with Azure Purview. That's how you stop agents from dumping confidential payroll into public team sites. Classification and sensitivity labels make the difference between a minor hiccup and a compliance failure. Third, mandatory audit logging and sessionized memory. This gives you a traceable ledger of what the agent saw and why it acted. No audit trail means you're explaining to regulators we don't actually know, which is not a career-enhancing moment. Here's another critical lever. Whether an agent acts with or without human approval is up to you. That's configurable if it's finance, HR, or any task that writes into core records always require approval by default. Click to proceed should be baked in, unless you want bots making payroll edits at 2 a.m. If it's low-risk items like surfacing documents or summarizing meetings, autonomy might be fine. But you decide upfront which category the task is in, and you wire approvals accordingly. Memory management doesn't get enough attention either. Without structured session IDs and per agent storage, your bot will either act like a forgetful goldfish or become a black box with unclear recall. The travel booking agent sample showed how Microsoft stores conversation and session IDs so you can replay actions and wipe them if needed. That's memory hygiene. As an admin, demand per agent per session scoping so a single agent doesn't carry context it shouldn't, and always require the ability to wipe memory clean on specific objects if compliance shows up with questions. Think of governance as guardrails on a two-lane road. Nobody puts them up to ruin the ride. They're there so one distracted moment doesn't send you over the edge. In practice, role-based access, scoped permissions, data classification, and logging aren't fun police. They're seatbelts. They keep your tenant alive when the unexpected happens. Let's make this operational. Before you flip autonomy on, ensure RBAC for agent identities, apply sensitivity labels to all data sources, enable full audit trails, and require approval flows for any write operations. That's your pre-flight checklist. Skip one and you're asking for the bot version of Shadow IT. Take that Copilot booking system again, too loose, and it blasts a confidential guest list to every attendee like it's doing you a favor. With governance locked in, it cross-checks sensitivity labels, respects scoped distribution, and stops short of exposing data. Same tool, two outcomes. One is a productivity boost your CIO will brag about. The other gets you dragged into an executive meeting with legal on speakerphone. Bottom line, responsible AI isn't paperwork, it's survival gear. With guardrails, agents become reliable teammates who operate quickly and log every move. Without guardrails, they are toddlers with power tools. Your move decides which version lands in production. And this isn't just about today's copilots. The next wave of agents is already on the horizon. And they won't just draft emails, they'll click buttons and drive UIs. That raises the stakes even higher. From low-code bots to Magma-powered agents. Today's Copilot Studio still feels like writing macros in Excel, useful but clunky. Tomorrow's Magma-powered agents? Think less macro helper and more junior teammate that stares at dashboards, clicks through screens, and runs full workflows before you've even finished your first coffee. That's the shift coming at us. Copilot Studio is training wheels. Magma is the engine that turns the bike into something closer to a dirt bike with nitrous strapped on. Here's what actually makes Magma different. It isn't limited to text prompts. It's a multimodal vision language action, VLA model that processes images, video, screen layouts, and movement, all layered on top of a language model. Techniques like set of mark, SOM, where interactive elements such as buttons get numerical labels, and trace of mark, TOM, which tracks objects moving across time, allow it to connect what it sees with what it can do. That means Magma doesn't just read sentences, it watches UI flows, recognizes patterns like this button leads to approval, and learns how to act. And it's not sampling small experiments either. It was trained on roughly 39 million multimodal samples spanning UI screenshots, robotic trajectories, and video data. Which is why, unlike Copilot Studio's text-only scope, Magma's playbook stretches across tapping a button, managing a navigation flow, or even mimicking a robotic action it saw during training. That shift matters. Copilots today live in the drafting lane. Emails, summaries, queries, maybe nudging at task lists. Magma operates at the execution layer. Instead of suggesting an Outlook draft, Magma-level agents can recognize the submit button in the UI and press it. Instead of surfacing a data point in Power BI, they can scroll the dashboard, isolate a chart, and pull it into an action plan for finance leadership. Think about UI interaction as a boundary line. Everything before Magma could draft and propose. Everything after Magma can draft, decide, and then literally click. Once you cross into click automation, your guardrails can no longer stop at data access. They also have to cover interface actions, so an agent doesn't start wandering through menus you never meant it to touch. Picture a scenario. The agent is connected to your finance dashboard. Revenue dips. Instead of flagging, maybe you want to alert leadership, it fires a Teams post to the finance channel, attaches a draft report, and updates CRM records to prep offers for at-risk customers. Did you approve that workflow? Maybe not, but UI-level autonomy means the agent doesn't need a Compose email API. It watched how dashboards and retention flows work, and it built the chain of clicks itself. The time you save comes with new overhead, auditing what steps the agent took and verifying they lined up with your policy. The technical backbone explains why it can pull that off. Magma is stacked on a Convex XL model for vision and a Llama 3.8b model for language. It processes text, frames, and actions as one shared context. SOM and TOM give it a structured way to parse visual steps, identifying buttons, tracking objects, and stringing together multi-step flows. And that's why in tests, Magma outperformed earlier models in both UI navigation accuracy and robotic control tasks. It isn't solving one type of problem, it's trained to generalize steps across multiple environments, whether that's manipulating a robot arm or clicking around SAP. For admins, that means this isn't just a chat bubble upgrade, It's the first wave of bots treating your tenant like an operating environment they can navigate at will. No surprise then that orchestration frameworks like AutoGen, LangChain, or the Assistance API are being name-dropped more often. They're how developers string multiple agents together, one planning, another executing, another validating. Admins don't need to learn those toolkits today, but you should flag them. They're the plumbing that turns one Magma agent into a team of agents operating across shared tasks. And if orchestration is running in your tenant, you'd better know which agents are calling the shots and which guardrails each one follows. Here's the trap. Fewer clicks for you doesn't mean fewer risks. When agents start handling UI-level tasks, bad configurations no longer just risk exposure of data, they risk direct execution of workflows. If governance doesn't expand to cover both what data agents can see and what actions they can take in an interface, the first misstep could be a cascade, reassigning tasks incorrectly, approving expenses that shouldn't exist, or misrouting customer communication. The faster the agent acts, the faster those mistakes move. So the path forward is clear, even if it's messy. Today, Copilots in Studio, scoped and sandboxed, where you babysit flows and tighten permissions. Tomorrow, Magma, multimodal and action-ready, running playbooks you didn't hard-code. Between them sits your governance story. And if you think today's guardrails stop mistakes, the UI action era will demand a thicker wall and sharper controls. Because at the end of the day, these agents are not just smarter chatbots, they're going to behave more like coworkers who don't need logins, don't need training time, and don't always stop to check in first. And whether that future feels like a win or a nightmare depends entirely on how tight those guardrails are when you first flip the switch. So here's the bottom line for admins. Copilot agents are already landing, and the difference between useful helper and giant mess comes down to how you roll them out. Keep it simple with 3 steps. First, pilot only predictable, low-risk agents, HR or IT self-service, before you touch customer-facing scenarios. Second, lock down permissions and require human approval for anything that writes into your systems. Third, instrument memory and audit logs so you can trace every session and wipe state when needed. Copilot save time, but IT better keep the keys to the company car. Do the basics, scope, audit, pilot, and agents become reliable helpers, not headaches. Subscribe to the M365 Show newsletter for more of these no-fluff playbooks, and follow the M365 Show LinkedIn page for live streams with MVPs who've broken this stuff before and fixed it.